we need to figure out why a certain group of people are not influenced by any of this, including the president's rhetoric, and another group of people are. And that's where I think there's much more curiosity and nuance. What has led this group of people to look toward leadership to decide what's true and how to feel, to not check in with their own resonance, to see someone say something and just immediately believe it about a group of people or even themselves, right? Like we were saying with me walking through the hallways.
Mm-hmm.
And when I bring it back to the individual experience, my own personal experience, it was there's no sense of self. I am orienting and attuning. So it's people that orienting as I'm looking, attuning as I'm feeling what I'm seeing. So I'm taking in what the world is saying about me as the truth rather than as a curious statement of, where do I land with that? I am here with Camille Leek, and we are going to discuss a really spicy topic about free speech and about hate speech and about can words harm and so on and so forth. One of our members brought this up, and I was really grateful for her bringing it up. She's a therapist, and she was mentioning, you know, I grew up with the idea that words can't hurt you. Sticks
Mm-hmm.
and stones can break my bones. Words can never hurt me.
Yeah.
And you and I were essentially like, yeah, we did too. And we were having this membership discussion after our radical rehumanizing session we did with Gray. And it pretty much came down to this place of, well, how do you have capacity for words that hurt your feelings?
Mm-hmm.
And where does it go from hurting your feelings to actually causing harm? And there's so much complexity around it. But I really wanted to dive in with you and highlight some of the things we were saying in that post session. Anything you want to say from the top before I do that?
No, I just want to underscore a part that you already said, that there's so much complexity to that. I want to just acknowledge that off the gate. There is no one sentence that says, yeah, it does, no, it doesn't, or, this is the end all be all. But for me, there's complexity, there's nuance, and I want to hit on all of the different angles that can feed into it.
Absolutely, me too. And I always like to say as well, Camille and I actually don't think we have anything figured out. Like, we're Virgos, and when we talk, we sound really confident because we feel safe saying what we feel, even if it might change an hour later. But I'll speak for myself, but I don't think that I'm the authority on free speech. I just want to talk about it in a way I don't really hear people talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. I have my perspective. I have my experience. I have my opinion. And like you said, all those things can change in a day or two. But yeah, I'm more here to share, my perspective, my experience, and how I'm working from that.
Yeah. So the reason why I think our work is so important to this discussion is what we're really talking about when we talk about free speech is we're talking about capacity, right? We're talking about someone's personal capacity to witness things that are offensive, to witness things, hear things that are controversial, to hear things and even opinions from others that might oppose their actual way of living or their lifestyle, and how to discern in your body what's a threat and what's simply offensive or triggering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of the baseline of the work we do all the time, especially in somatic experiencing and somatic psychology. You're teaching yourself and your clients and your groups, how do we discern actual threat from expected threat? Right, that's kind of what we're at. So even though this can veer into a political place because we're talking about the First Amendment, we're talking about an American experience, free speech. It's actually not political for me. It's actually quite somatic, and I just wanted to check in on that with you too.
Well, yeah, I feel like the beginning of it is a somatic piece. Like, even to start with that old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. There's a part of me that, like, yeah, absolutely, that's true. But there's a but. There's the but of, has that sense of self been established? Part of the reason that words can hurt is because that sense of self hasn't been established, or that particularly if I think about in childhood, if you haven't been shown or reinforced what it means to have a sense of self, or what it means to have people say something about you but you not internalize it, then those things can't hurt because you haven't had that that development. you haven't had that experience of hearing and seeing people say things, but then also having enough experience with pausing and saying, do I actually believe that about myself? I don't. Okay, so I'm going to keep it moving.
Mm,
And I recognize I have a level of privilege where I was very fortunate to grow up with two parents that taught me that at a very early age. Like, people talk shit about Muhammad and Jesus. They gonna talk shit about you too, from the very beginning. So there was sort of this sense in my development of, even at an early age, 5, 6, 7, 8, we're starting to get in the practice of hearing people say things and then pausing to see if I actually believe that about myself, if it's true. Um, and I say it's a privilege because I also recognize there are people who did not have that experience. They grew up with parents and other adult figures who said horrible, horrible things to them and about them, or internalized horrible things about themselves. And so that was perpetuated down to the child. It's a long way of saying I do feel at first it is a somatic thing. Do I have a sense of self? Am I able, have I established that sense of safety, that ability to self-regulate, even in the midst of people saying something negative about me?
mm. Yeah, so I want to define sense of self for people the way we teach it and experience it. Even in your example of being 8 years old and being taught to pause and notice how do you feel about what they're saying, the you that your parents taught you to notice. Self is really that witnesser. It's that conscious energy that witnesses a situation and has the ability to actually track it, see how you feel, kind of compare it. Well, how do I feel about what they're saying? What are they saying? And seeing there's a separation. When you don't have that sense of self developed, and by the way, we can develop this in our 80s if we never
Hmm.
did. It's a little more challenging, but it's never impossible. When that sense of self isn't developed, your self literally hinges on how people see you. So you can't have a definitive yes or no words heard. This is where it gets really complex and nuanced.
Yes.
If I never got that stage in development or that privilege of learning the practice of having even knowing I had a self and feeling the self and witnessing, then my reaction, my reflex is to assume how you see me is me.
Hmm.
And so I think of myself in middle school because I lived that. I know that really well in my bones. And I remember walking through the hallway and having people throw things at me and call me really horrible names. And in that moment, I didn't have sense of self. So when they said something like freak, I felt like a freak.
Hmm.
It was that quick. You know, the words transmitted to somatic experience, and somatic experience became identity. So there wasn't even a moment to pause and question, do I think I'm a freak?
Correct.
Why are they calling me a freak? Why are they so important to me when I never hang out with these people? I just see them at school. Can I think about people who think I'm lovely? I didn't have any ability to pendulate or orient to any other story except for their way of seeing me in that moment. And their words became my identity. Now, that built up over time in my body, and I had a lot of shame, a lot of self hatred, and that led to having lots of suicidal ideation. I like to say ideation over being suicidal
Hmm.
because there were a few times I got close to attempting, but I never actually attempted. And I like to respect, the differences based on what people who are listening experience. But I lived with wanting to die and thinking of all the ways it could happen for years throughout middle school. And so if you kind of take that chunk of my life and you ask me the question then, are words harmful? I would have said yes. I would have said absolutely. I want to die because of how people see me, because there
Hmm.
wasn't that sense of self. Now, fast forward, gaining so much sense of self and really having a clarity about, oh, things come in that don't have to. I'm allowed to keep out the word freak. I'm allowed to agree with it. I'm allowed to
Hmm.
disagree. Like I have all this agency over what I actually accept and receive, even offense. It is a choice, even on some unconscious level, to be offended. Like there's so much more agency than I thought there was. So if you ask me now at this part of my development, for me, if words hurt, I would say no. I would say they trigger. I would say sometimes a tension comes up and I realize I actually agree with what they're saying about me, and that hurts more than what they said. But I don't actually find people's words, even their hateful words, harmful for me at this point. So it's kind of like when someone asks the question, are words harmful, or there's certain phrases, speeches that shouldn't be protected, that shouldn't be said, it's like such a cultural, personal experience. To say yes or no wouldn't be fully appropriate.
Right, right. And that takes me to, well, actually, two places. The first one, I'll say, even with that childhood development, that like you were saying, there wasn't even that instinct or that moment to pause and take it in. Part of my development, even though there was kind of sort of a pause, it was somewhat reflexive. It was like, "You're a king, a queen, you're fabulous," like whatever they say. There also wasn't. It was sort of like, just, yeah, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never hurt you. There wasn't also the pause for, oh, that made me sad. Oh, do I believe that? And that's one thing I am doing a little bit differently with my children, not just fuck them, you know who you are. It's first, okay, yeah, some of that did make you a little sad. Can we
Because that
acknowledge that?
overrides also a trauma response, right?
Right, because then that's a form of bypassing too. Because if we bypass the fact, because that was part of my experience as well, and I think that it contributes to when we, in particular for me, like the black superwoman syndrome, where nope, I'm not supposed to let anything hurt me. It doesn't hurt me. I'm a queen. I'm strong. Well, no, it made me sad. It did touch into some insecurities. Let me take a moment to be with those insecurities and what else is true. And so for me, for myself, I wanted to have that balance of, yeah, let's acknowledge what's happening right now. Is there a part of me that's internalizing it? Is this tapping into something that I kind of already believe or I have concerns about for myself? But then two, also noticing, like, is it true? Do I believe it, or does all of me believe it? What part of me doesn't believe it? And holding both, or what else? Maybe it is true. Maybe that is true, but what else is true, or what is the meaning that's attached to it? You try to use this word or this phrase in this way, but is this really how I feel about the word? Maybe I don't mind the word or the phrase, but it means something very different to me. And so, for me, it's important to hold both, as we talk a lot about within somatics, holding both. So I wanted to acknowledge that too, as another form of the bypassing, where we can just go straight to, nope, I'm a rock, nothing bothers me, or we completely just internalize what people say. Um, the other part I wanted to bring up around harmful words, particularly as we're thinking about free speech, there is the counter point, or that, not just harm, but danger. And I think that's the distinction for me that's important to be made. Not is do words call harm, but are they putting people in danger? So there's the classic example. You cannot be in a crowded theater and yell fire. You will cause a stampede. People will get hurt. You are putting people in danger by yelling fire in that context. And I think those are things for us to be aware of, that we can say things that put people in immediate danger. Harm is where it gets a little bit more nebulous. So, for example, if I think about immediate danger, if I am the president of a country and I say, "Hey, it's this XYZ group of people, you can do whatever you want to them. No retribution. You can rob, steal, kick, whatever." You're putting those people in immediate danger. Harm is more so when we say things like, I'm thinking about, just recently I saw ICE commercial in my state, and it's a recruiting. It's like, and it's showing undocumented workers, but the verbiage, the over speaking is, "Come get the rapists, the robbers, all the most offensive, vile criminals out of our country." Ugh, is it dangerous? I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of harmful. And so that's where it
Mhm.
gets a little bit more nebulous for me.
Yeah, what I hear in those distinct differences is I'm characterizing a group of people in a harmful way. And the other example is I'm actually directing people to do something.
Mhm.
It's those are two distinct things to sit with. And as you're saying these examples and these pieces, and I like this difference of harm and danger, because when I hear harm, like harmful rhetoric is what I've been
Mhm.
hearing a lot lately, or harmful characterization of people, just like you said, like to cloak every undocumented worker as a rapist or as a criminal,
Yeah.
that's a harmful characterization of somebody. That's just untrue. For the whole, of course, individuals, anything's possible. For the whole, untrue. So what I'm saying with that is when you're saying something harmful about a group of people, I think the better word here would be potential harm,
Hmm.
right? Because it depends on whose body these words are landing into. For example, you and I can hear something like that. And because we have the practice of self and we have the practice of embodiment, we can actually weigh what we're being told of how we feel. So we see something that says, get all the murderers out of here. And we both, or I'll speak for myself, I think, oh, that's interesting. They're saying this in a way that sounds like every undocumented person is a murderer. I
Right.
know they're not. I have some friends who are undocumented. Like, I go into that place of, well, I know that's just not the reality. So that harmful rhetoric doesn't attach to me to create harm in any way. It just kind of, I see it, I dislike it, I turn away from it, and I attune to what I know to be true. Then you have individuals, similar to what we said earlier about this developmental stage that gets missed, that they are looking to people in power to decide how to feel. And what's interesting about the current era is we have so much information coming at us. There's a lot of controversy even with Instagram and people like me who aren't licensed,
Hmm.
rather registered dietitians or licensed psychotherapists talking about trauma, talking about nutrition, talking about health, because there are people that have never done it but just speak about it. And people internalize it who listen and they do something and they end up getting hurt. Some people even end up dying by trying some intervention that they found out online. Now, and this is just, I think I'm just so hardcore free speech that
Yeah.
I understand that and I wish that wasn't happening for people. Yet I don't think oppressing or repressing people's expressions will fix that. I think it's a bigger cultural change of we need to figure out why a certain group of people are not influenced by any of this, including the president's rhetoric, and another group of people are. And that's where I think there's much more curiosity and nuance. What has led this group of people to look toward leadership to decide what's true and how to feel, to not check in with their own resonance, to see someone say something and just immediately believe it about a group of people or even themselves, right? Like we were saying with me walking through the hallways.
Hmm.
And when I bring it back to the individual experience, my own personal experience, it was there's no sense of self. I am orienting and attuning. So just people orienting as I'm looking, attuning as I'm feeling what I'm seeing. So I'm taking in what the world is saying about me as the truth rather than as a curious statement of, where do I land with that? And so I bring this back to you, Camille, around your personal belief. Does it match mine? Is it a little different in terms of radical free speech, which protects hate speech? It's protected in
Hmm.
the First Amendment. You can't direct someone to do something, but you can say whatever you want about people, and there can be consequences. Where do you go with that?
Oh yeah, no, I'm a big proponent of free speech. I'm going to butcher the quote. It's the lawyer who said, I think particularly about the KKK. Like I might vehemently disagree with what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it.
Who
I
said that?
agree. I don't ask me. It's a famous quote, and I should
Okay.
know it. But
Some
yes,
famous unnamed wise person.
yes, invoking the nameless ancestors. But I subscribe to that very much. I might vehemently disagree, which I might be disgusted by the vile things that fall out of your mouth. And yet I will fight to the death for your right to say it.
Mhm.
Because there is that distinction between you saying what you're saying and then putting people in danger. Now, I do want to acknowledge, even from my own experience, when it comes to hate speech, when it comes to harm speech, uh, I always go to my children because they're so front of mind for me that sometimes when I hear these things, the thing that comes up in me is like, you're making it so much harder for my children. You're going to make it so much harder for them to walk the hallways of their school. You're going to make it so much harder for them to walk the streets of the city. And again, sort of going back to that even example of the kid, like, oh, that made me sad to hear them see that, to hear them say that. It's important for me to take time to be with that, that grief of the fact is my children and I live in a world where marginalization is present. And more than likely, it's not going to end in my lifetime. It's not going to end in their lifetime. They are going to have to experience forms of bias, prejudice, discrimination. And there is an ache in my heart for that. And there's a part of me that think, well, if people just didn't say these things, then they wouldn't have to experience it. And there's also a part of me that knows that's not true. Sort of to your point, in that for me, I find that sometimes if we were to say something like, going back to that ice commercial, where they just shouldn't say those things. Well, for me, we're addressing a symptom, not the underlying problem. Just like you were describing, I'm much more curious to understand how do we cultivate groups of people for whom that sort of language, that invitation would be so susceptible, or how do we how, how do we begin to understand and really intervene when people are going through these different developments and quote unquote get radicalized at some point, rather than just saying you just shouldn't say that, because in my opinion, just because you tell one person or one organization you shouldn't say that, well, the person who's going to be susceptible to that language anyway is just going to end up going somewhere else. Like, is the if just because we silence one individual, one organization, doesn't mean the sentiment will end and that it will go away. The belief is still going to be there. The susceptibility to that belief is still going to be there. And I think sometimes because we are afraid, just like in my example, because I am afraid of what that belief might do to my children, I want to just say, well, just don't say those things, and then everything will be okay. Um,
Mhm.
and like I said, I just wanted to acknowledge that because it's hard. It's hard to feel that fear.
This is the discussion that I would just love to see all over the news,
Mm,
because whether it's the left or the right, it doesn't even matter the side. And I've been amazed by this. You and I talked about this the other day, how during the Biden administration, the right was just so upset about the free speech that was being, repressed from the administration that was liberal at that time, Democratic. If you had a certain hashtag on Instagram, you get it taken down. If you said something on YouTube, you'd be demonetized. Like, there was a real influence to not say certain words
mm,
based on the values primarily on the left at that time. Then fascinating in the last week to see people in the Trump administration literally saying we're going to go after people that have hate speech. And we're like, wait a minute. For the last 4 years, you were just saying that hate speech should be tolerated.
mm.
And now you see how painful it is when someone hates your side. And so it's a it's a non-partisan issue. This is why I think it's so beyond politics. It's a relational issue and a developmental somatic issue to me because of what you said. I was writing down when you were talking about um, the example with your children. Well, if they just want to say this, or I could shield them from hearing this, they won't get hurt. And logically, you're correct. Like, if they can be in a room and no one ever says something about them that make them feel bad about themselves, they won't have that. Um, they won't be confronted with that sensation that comes up in their body. So I can either police the people around my children, just using children as an example,
Mhm,
because as a parent, I feel that in my heart too. I can police the people around my children so my children don't have to feel it. Or I can train my children. I can teach them, like a master would teach a disciple, how to navigate sensation when it comes up, how to feel sense of self, how to weigh in, right? How I believe and what you believe about me. And those are two different things. How to play with
yeah.
attunement, right? And so when I think about this, what I really hear is capacity for activation. And
Mhm,
this is why you and I and Marika and Evan have always agreed we never tell anybody this is a safe space, because you'll be in a room with us and someone will say something in front of 50 people they never said before out loud. 20 of the 50 will be horribly triggered. The others will love what they said. Now, in that moment when everyone can take a breath together and realize I'm triggered, but I'm okay, you have just found safety in yourself. That's
mhm,
actual safety versus us saying this is a safe space. We're going to do everything we can to not trigger you. It's the opposite of the technology of somatics for me. So I'm saying I think what we have to start talking about, and it's going to be a shit show for a while. This is a big collective thing, but we have to talk about how are we teaching our kids and ourselves how to relate to the charge that comes up instead of trying to avoid it coming up at all by telling other people what to do or not do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love that. Sort of that example of the teach because it really is a teaching of and again to use my children as an example there that I've tried to already start doing that even in quote unquote subtle ways like even
Mhm.
when my oldest first did it start doing show and tell at 4 years old his question when he picked a toy to me was do you think other kids in the class will like it well how do you feel about it like even
Mhm.
starting there reinforcing that or when he does get picked on, like taking time to have a conversation with him and acknowledging the hurt and then also acknowledging the fabulousness that still that resides in him. And can he hold both? Can he hold that, yeah, maybe two kids said something to you that day, but what else happened to you that day? What else were you experiencing? Or even something like hearing them I don't even necessarily want them to go to a school or never see a YouTube video that says oh that's gay because they've seen it and then they said it and I said oh that's interesting what does gay mean I don't know even though they have a bunch of same-sex
Yeah,
couples all
yeah.
around them we haven't put words around those just like different families look different ways like I don't know well why are you saying a word you don't know the meaning to and is it wrong do you know people who are gay? Do I know people who are gay? So even for me, it's much more important rather than never ever hearing the phrase "that's so gay." I want them to hear that phrase, and then we have a conversation about it. I feel the same way again going back to that ice commercial. I'd love for
Mhm.
them to say like, "Mom, so are all undocumented workers are they killers?" Let's have a conversation about that.
Yes.
Are all undocumented workers killers? Do you think we might know some undocumented workers? Or because yeah, I don't want them I want them to be able to receive that information and like you said, then pause and have their own sort of internal conversation.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I think what's I think so important about beliefs and opinions is they're not bound to bodies, right? This is why assassinations are so dumb and unhelpful because it just amplifies the belief even
Right.
more. It just emboldens whichever side got their leader killed or harmed.
Mm-hmm.
And so people go into this place of either doubling down or more people are grieving, whatever it is. But to be able to consciously engage in something that opposes you, even this example of a commercial with your child saying, "Let's talk about this." To be able to talk about it actually creates a sense of safety with opposition and a sense of safety with disagreement and a sense of safety with the charge that comes with controversy. Eh, for me, I think how exhausting it would be as a society, and it's been tried all around the world, it always fails at some point, to try to police what people think and what they say and how they feel. You even see this. I think about this a lot when I think of Jim Crow laws in these eras, where after enslaved people were free, just because it was a law now that they were free, didn't suddenly make people not be racist. They just
Mm.
doubled down these horrible ways. Not saying they shouldn't have been free, but I think you know where I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It's like you can't change values or cultures overnight just by changing law or by repressing an idea. It has to like compost, take time and kind of get a little messy and then change the shape of it and then relate to the thing you're afraid of. And over time, you get these amazing actual new cultural norms and values that arise in a natural way instead of a performative way. Otherwise, what you get is someone performing the thing they're being told to do, completely hiding and festering how they really feel, and that comes out in all these sideways, even in violent expressions that maybe wouldn't have been as severe if they were able to speak it in a way that was held and then allow it to transform.
Oh well, yeah, because I think for many of us, there can be when we experience that repression for me it's a form of fawning and I like to say that the byproducts of fawning are resentment and rage so if we fawn for so long then it's going to come out in that resentment and rage rather than if we have the capacity when something actually comes up that maybe we don't agree with something that's a little different even if it's not even great just doesn't sit right or we just have a question rather than suppressing it and assimilating or just festering in the dissent can't do we have the capacity to have that conversation do we have the capacity to say Oh, that's interesting. I don't agree, or that hasn't been my experience. Do we have the capacity to receive when someone says that's I don't agree, or that's not my experience? Or like in a lot of cases, most of us, either individually or as collectives, we gear towards assimilation. Assimilation feels safe. Like if we all just do this one thing, it's predictable, then everything will be okay. But like you said, time and time throughout history, we have tried this and it fails miserably. It does not work.
That's right. And maybe everyone listening can take a moment to imagine that. Imagine something you believe that you can't help believing. It's a belief. And I'm saying an action, but it's a belief. And just imagine someone telling you you're not allowed to speak it, you're not allowed to think it, you should actually stop believing it. What that feels like in your body, what it feels like to be in a relationship or in an environment where you're speaking and someone says, "Stop, I'm not okay with that, you're not allowed to talk right now." When these are in intimate relationships, we call that abuse. If someone says my boyfriend, the moment I say something that offends him, tells me I have to stop talking, we would say, sounds like an abusive relationship. You might want to get out of that or do some therapy. But when it's collectives, it loses that kind of intimacy that's important to remember relationally. And in a way, the collective, it can almost get dehumanized. We see it as policy and things on paper and the way we want the future to be. But there's humans that make up the collective, right? So to just shut down someone's belief or whatever's coming out of their mouth because it makes you feel a certain way, it doesn't open up that bridge for what I experience as transmutation,
Mm.
where I take in what you say, not attached to it, but I take it in to be curious. And I ask you questions like just with your son, like, do you know what it means to be gay? Do you know what it means to call something gay? Like, what does that mean to you? Rather than, how dare you say, never say that again, Malcolm. Like, that's not
Right.
going to do anything. It's going to create all
Mhm.
this shame, shutdown, and then he's going to really want to say it.
Right.
That's what I'm
Okay.
always told to don't
Let's just
push
leave
the
it that. Yeah.
don't push the red button,
the,
right?
the pathological demand avoidance. Like whatever I say, don't do. If I just said, don't say that's so gay. Well, guess what? He's going to be saying seven times a day because we're all going to do it. It goes back to the the experiment. They put up the sign and says, please walk on the sidewalk. People walk on the sidewalk. You put up a sign that says, don't walk on the grass. Everybody wants to walk on the grass. Same exact part. Nothing else changed. But you tell me what not to do. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And that's just the way our bodies work. So that immediate fence that we put up, that oh well, there must be something there. In fact, some bookstores, I love that they do it. Whenever a book is banned in like a high school or a state, there's some bookstores that have a table of banned books, and like sales will actually go through the roof once the book is banned. We're like, oh, there must be something in this. I want to buy this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was talking to one of my friends who writes um like copy for people, like press for people, and she says the thing that makes people want to read someone's book or buy their product or look into them is when you say they're doing something they're not supposed to do.
Mm.
Like when they somehow characterize the person as controversial, or you won't believe what they said. You're dying to dive in and get to know it. And so there is this human nature of the more I say you can't, the more you're going to want to.
Mhm.
And at least in American politics, which are so divided right now, you see this happening if you pull back and kind of look each presidential term. When it switches hands to another side, you see the side become really reactive with words they weren't allowed to say before, or laws that to me are way beyond the congruence of the actual experience, like an overreaction to something,
Mhm.
because you've repressed a certain category of people. And then the same happens when it goes back over. So much more conversation, much more curiosity instead of just don't do that. And I've had so much experience with this. I think one reason why I'm passionate about free speech is because, I mean, first of all, I've been through both horrors or both experiences of the feeling of wanting to die because of the things people said, and knowing what it feels like to think, could we just find a way to shut this down? Can we just get rid of these people? Can we just shut them down? Can we kill them? Like I used to have those feelings, right? Growing up because I felt so helpless. But
Mm.
then realizing how powerful it is when I think of walking through those hallways right now, there's nothing going on in my body because it's so not even attaching to me. But even in my 20s, when I would think about it, it would feel like it was happening now because there was still so much attachment to how somebody saw me. So I have this passion for this because I've lived that side and get it of wanting to shut people down. And now I feel the freedom, but I also feel what it's like to try to be shut down because I am a public figure online. So when I speak about something, I've seen people use hate speech or harmful language as terms to say, Luis, you're not even allowed to go there. And I find that fascinating. And I think I find it the most when I talk about gender ideology. Whenever I talk about my opinions in that field or that culture, whatever you want to call it, I get so many responses of this is really harmful language. And I realize when you say that to a person, this massive freeze response and shame comes over a person's body, which is interesting because this is kind of what we're talking about. Like,
Mhm.
it's the same thing, isn't it? If I'm attuning to someone saying what you just said is harmful, and I don't pause to ask myself, is it harmful to me? What did I say? What were my intentions? I think it's good to pause and get curious. Like, did I speak out of time with my integrity? And there's a few times where I have, and I'll actually go back and say, "You're right. I'm going to reword that. That was spoken from a dissociated place." But to see that and notice how powerful it is to take in someone's story about you and then pivot and say, you're allowed to feel that. I feel okay with what I'm doing. I've felt the other side now. Like I'm the kids in school now that were bullying me because I'm not bullying anybody, but people feel bullied by my opinions. So I'm just saying I've been in all these interesting perspectives. I've experienced these different perspectives and viewpoints on this, and I still feel really. I feel like it's really important to maintain our free speech.
Yeah, and that word bullied, that's another one. Like even even with my kids, I appreciate the awareness of bullying, but they are very quick to come home and say, so and so was bullying me. And I'm like, okay, look, pause. Like, what happened? Did y'all get in an argument? That is different than
Oh
they were
yeah.
bullying you. And in the same respect, disagreeing with you, even when you are part of a marginalized community, doesn't necessarily mean I'm bullying you.
Mm.
And I think we that is something for us to be keenly aware of. I think sometimes we can, not even sometimes, I think oftentimes, very, very important words are grossly misused and misappropriated. Um, Bullying has happened. Hate speech has happened. Disagreement does not always mean that you're being bullied. Disagreement doesn't mean that hate speech is happening. People can have different perspectives, and I think it's incredibly important, particularly if you say you are a proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to be aware of the difference. Because pot, let me introduce you to kettle. Because if you're just saying, well, because you disagree with me, that's hate speech, that's just assimilation on the other side. That's not diversity,
Mm.
equity, and inclusion.
Well said. I mean, how do you this is why you're such a unicorn in the space of DEI and modern day as a liberal, as far as I'm concerned. You're a unicorn because I don't know what happened, but somewhere in the last decade, there's this narrative that if you're in a marginalized group, you're supposed to be protected from being uncomfortable. And I understand where it comes from because I know growing up in my own marginalized group, you have usually more trauma, more relational trauma. You
Mhm.
have a lot more adversity. You have things that get in your way of being in society the way someone who isn't marginalized might not. So there's this understanding of you've held more than I have, perhaps, or you've experienced things I haven't through this certain lens than I have. And I'm going to tell you my opinion. I want to hear yours. I actually find it quite disrespectful to assume because someone's marginalized, they can't handle something.
Hmm.
And so to say, well, you're in this group, so we're going to protect you from ever having to feel pain about how people feel about you. If someone says something about you, that's hate speech and it should be a crime, for example. These are some schools of thought. I don't know how that helps the group because, again, I learned a lot of this kind of radical free speech stuff from the marginalized. It was the people in the 40s, 50s, 60s, Black Americans, Latinos, my family from Puerto Rico. I learned from them, like, hey, the power is actually not attaching to what society thinks about you. So, what's your opinion of whether it's a personal one, a political one, whatever? How did that switch from my marginalization is proof that I'm really powerful to
Mhm.
I must be protected because I can't handle being disagreed with? Like, explain this to me.
I think that part of the switch happened when we got allyship confused with saviorism.
Ooh,
Um,
tell me more.
and I think when we think about privilege, we're fundamentally thinking about a form of power. And the idea is that in order to show up as an ally, you're going to use your privilege, you're going to use your power to amplify the experience of those who are marginalized, whose voices may not be more likely to be heard. But in that, which is very great, I'm a big proponent of that. Yes, allyship, do that, but amplify the experiences of the marginalized. People who wanted to show up in allyship as allies, but were still in their own trauma response, weren't really showing up as allies. They were showing up as saviors. That is, they weren't doing their due diligence. They weren't actually listening to the marginalized community,
Hmm.
but they were just projecting what they think the marginalized community needed or what they should do. Or they were also part of the trauma response is frankly, it's really uncomfortable to be with the way that you've perpetuated marginalization. So what I'm going to do is just put this hard rule, this hard line in the sand, saying no, you can't do that. Shut that down. Woo! Now I've done my due diligence. I've shown up as an ally. No, that hasn't really happened. You really haven't done the due diligence. You haven't really communed or engaged with the marginalized community to hear what it is that they're seeking, what it is that they need. And two, doing this is actually a way to keep you at arm's length from that community and their actual experience. It's a form of dissociation. It's actually the other side of the coin for me when we think about denial or rationalization of marginalization. If I can rationalize it or deny that it exists, I get to keep myself at arm's length from it because its presence is very uncomfortable. On the flip side, if the presence is still uncomfortable, I can still keep myself at arm's length from it by becoming a savior and just making these performative, grandiose gestures that don't actually do anything. Does that help? Does that?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I've had this observation of allies being more triggered by things than the people they're allying with. I've
Mhm.
seen people on the behalf of, let's say, Latinos being really angry when someone says something about Puerto Ricans or Latinos or Mexicans.
Yeah.
But then I'll talk to my Mexican and my Puerto Rican friends. They're like, "Are you kidding me? We're so used to people's dumb ideas that we didn't even hear what they said."
Mhm.
And so there's this like righteous rage for the other community, thinking like you're saying, like that's a sense of allyship of I need to make sure no one, people come onto my page, for example, and they more so speak for these other communities than themselves.
Mhm.
As I'm saying this to you, it's amazing. I rarely hear someone say, I'm trans and you hurt me. I'll hear people say to me, how dare you say that about the trans community?
Mhm.
And then in my DMs, which is also really fascinating, all the transsexuals have shown all the transsexuals, not all the transsexuals,
All of them.
all every single one.
All 17.
Yeah, all 17. Many transsexuals that follow me are in the DM saying, thank you. Thank you. I agree with what you said. Thank you. So it's interesting how I tend to ruffle the feathers more for allies than the
Mhm.
actual groups I'm even speaking about and speaking from. I'm part of a lot of these groups myself, but they characterize me as not because of how I look or present. But it interests me because when you say that saviorism allyship piece, that plays in to this. When I ask the question, this kind of political collective switchover of okay, they can't handle being hurt. It's my job to protect them from being hurt, like from what
Mhm.
you're saying, because I haven't been with my own hurt, I haven't been with how I've hurt them. All these things you're bringing up, and then the whole narrative turns into we must protect these groups from essentially experiencing the consequences of free speech, which is being offended.
Mhm.
And I don't think trying to protect someone from being offended empowers them at all.
No, no, that hasn't been my experience. But I can understand the logic again, sort of going back to my own experience with my children. But particularly for thinking about this within the context of allyship, it's important to recognize the paternalistic nature of that.
Mm,
Between me and my children, it makes sense. I am their parent. There's going to be a paternalistic nature. But if you are invoking a paternalistic approach to me as one adult to another, there's something to be there to be with there because again, that's really no better than the rationalization or the denial of marginalization. It's just the other side of the coin. So again, you got to get curious. Why am I taking reverting to saviorism? Why am I reverting to a form of parentalism as it relates to this other group of adults? That's still, in essence, a form of marginalization. Um,
Mhm.
but again, I can understand why, because like I was saying, to actually either one, be with the experience, or two, be with the fact that I have directly, indirectly, inadvertently, unknowingly perpetuated the marginalization is a lot to hold. So rather than actually be with that, I'm going to go into saviorism or to paternalism.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that breakdown. I wondered if we can start closing the podcast with leading the listener and our friends here from membership through a practice based on what we do when
Mm.
we hear speech that is at first offensive to us or makes us feel threatened in some way. Just kind of walking them through your own personal internal step. If you want to start or I start, whatever feels good to you.
Sure, yeah. The first thing I do, mm, the first thing I do is feel exactly where I am right now. What am I experiencing right now in this moment?
So everyone at home, let's follow along. So think of a situation where you heard something, saw something, it offended you, it felt threatening. You would call it hateful or harmful to you personally. And let's listen to what Camille's showing us. So say that again. Let's start from the top.
I like to notice, what am I experiencing, directly experiencing right now in this moment, outside of what I'm hearing in terms of their words. Where am I? Who am I with? What do I smell in the air? I like to notice a particular place in my body that can attune to that present moment, that, that current direct environment. And this offers me a bit of resourcing. And then I like to let my awareness go to what the person actually said. One particular statement, sentence, word, and then notice the specific part of my body that responds to that statement, to that word. And I like to notice the physical sensation of it, but also any images that might come with it. Particularly for me, I like to notice if this is familiar. What are the other times I felt this way? This piece around noticing the other times is important for me because I find that when I hear hate speech and harm speech, part of what makes it so heavy to hold is that my body's not just responding to the present moment, but to all the other moments that feel very similar. And then noticing the similarities. Again, I might want to help my body orient to right now, to distinguish between all the examples, past and present, that this word, this sentence may bring up in me, but to come back to right now. And from that place that can really attune to just right now. And then like to notice, how does this place want to respond? Sometimes this place wants to say, fuck you. But sometimes this place is just like, meh. Or sometimes this place has a question that wants to be asked. I'll pause there.
It's really beautiful practice. So I want to tell people listening, you can pause if you want more time with this. What Camille's really walking us through is at first establishing where you are. Because when you see something or hear something that's painful or hurtful or offensive or scary, it's really like a rapid reflex to attune to that, as if you're with them, as if they're in your room, as if it's happening now to you. So when you can feel where you are compared to what you're looking at or who you're hearing this from, it gives you an actual sense of space and environment. And it brings you into what we call relative safety, which means if I hear something threatening and I feel like I'm threatened, but I feel, and I do this exact thing, I sit on my office chair, I feel the chair, I look around the room to see, okay, is this thing happening right here? Is this person even here? Are they on my
Right.
computer? And when my body realizes that I'm watching something that's not from my actual environment, I instantly feel this relative safety and something softens in me. But then the second part Camille's walking us through is tracking the charge. This energy, this pressure, this very uncomfortable sensation that arises, there is a lot of information in these sensations. And when we don't have an embodiment practice, these sensations send a signal to the brain that right now we're under attack, even though we're most of the time not. And so to sit with the sensation, the first thing it does is it brings the witnesser online. So that self starts to be developed because self is witnessing sensation instead of just being the sensation. And when I realize, oh, there's a panic in my chest and I'm in this really comfortable, safe bedroom, I then, myself then has established, oh, the threat is not out there right now. It's in my body. And then I'm able to hold it, go to it, just like you said, see if it gives me images, if it gives me action and expression, if it has a history attached to it. So much important information. The only thing I want to add to it is asking yourself, do I agree and believe this thing I'm seeing? Especially when it's about you or a group you feel you belong to. Where do I fear that about myself or agree on some deep, deep level or feel shame on some deep, deep level? And when this person says it, that part attaches to it. That's one. And the other question is to ask, based on what I'm hearing, what am I imagining about the future? Because a lot of this pain we get from speech, as we're saying, hate speech, harmful rhetoric, whatever we want to call it, it tells us a picture about the future which terrifies us. And that future may be true. I'm not going to say it's not. I don't know. But the practice we're teaching is, can you feel where you are now? And if you notice that your pain is coming from what you expect to happen, you are in two different places. The parts of you that are in pain are orienting toward future and bracing, and the parts that are settled are where you are right now. So there's not even the burden of having to get rid of the pain. There's just discerning, is the pain coming from my environment or is it coming from this future that I'm imagining because of what I'm hearing? And this whole practice, these two things I added and the beautiful piece you walked us through, it can help so many of you learn how to tend to your capacity for controversial, painful, even hateful opinions. And then your instinct will take you where to go from there. We don't have a prescription of go do this, go do that. When you're with the sensations, they start instructing you. Anything else you want to add before we close?
Um, just the other part that's coming up for me. I spoke to this a little bit ago, but in that tracking the charge, like you were saying, there's going to be so much information in there, and one part of the information, at least that has been in my experience, that sometimes we bypass is the grief, the sadness. Like for some of you, that may come up. And being with grief, being with sadness can feel very vulnerable, defenseless, and unprotected. So we want to go to that anger, we want to go to that rage. But I found in a lot of cases for me, sometimes when I hear that rhetoric, when I hear harmful speech, part of it is just the grief of living in a world where marginalization and hate is just still present. And what does it mean for me to take time to be with that grief, to be with that sadness? And it can feel frustrating to not like either get rid of the sadness within me or to get rid of the thing outside of me that's causing the sadness. But it can be very, very helpful being with anything that can come up in doing this practice. But I just wanted to highlight that as well, because that can be sadness, the grief, like I said, can be actually a really expansive place. And some of us don't have capacity for that level of expansion. So we want to constrict around it by going to a place of anger or fixing something external to us.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we're going to close and move to the private discussion with our members. But do know, depending on when this episode comes out, there might still be time to join our 7-week course. So you can look in the episode details for that link. And if you get this later, beyond when the course begins, there's a self-led course. And we'll also put a link to that in the episode details. I say that because what Camille and I are speaking about, it comes from this foundational practice around creating self through embodiment. And we teach this in our 7-week course and in the self-led 4-week course. So all that information is in the links below in the episode details, and you can dive into that if you're more interested. I should just say before we close even who you are. I always just assume everyone knows because they listen to the
Me too.
podcast, but someone could just be tuning in.
For the first time, our
the first
intros are
time.
horrible. Yeah.
I am the worst at intros.
We just jump right in.
Damn. So why don't you just say what you do with HLN, and then we'll close.
Yeah. So hello, first time listeners, and you've made it all the way to the end without knowing who the hell I am. I am Camille. I'm a community manager at HLN as well as co-teacher. Oh my gosh. And it's chief financial bitch. Yeah.
There we go.
Getting our finances in order. I was a student in at the time 6-week course, so highly recommend it. Not to be hyperbolic, but it did literally change my life because 4 years later, here I am. This was not the plan. This was not the journey, but coming from a corporate background, a quote unquote successful executive career, 15-year career, left all that behind to become an SEP. What the hell is that? And do my own DEI stuff. And as you can imagine, the state DEI is in right now. But my life is not in a tailspin. It's actually going pretty good. And so that's me, community manager, assistant teacher, chief financial bitch. Would love to work with you further in the 7-week course or any of our spaces.
And I'll say, all you saviors out there, you ruined her DI career. You ruined her DI. It's going to come back because I had said you're the Noah's Ark of DEI. I believe that, but just had to throw a little shade at the end there. Okay. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. I have developed a 4-week self-paced course that takes 18 years of my personal and professional experience and puts it into one place where you can easily and quickly learn the foundations of recovering from stress and trauma. How does the food you eat affect your stress levels? How do the relationships in your life create stress or peace? How does the relationship you have with your body allow you to feel happier and more settled? I will cover all this and so much more in this 4-week self-paced course. And the best part, it's self-paced. You don't have to sign up at a certain date or finish it at a certain time. It's yours for life, and it's waiting there for you when you're ready to finish it. Throughout this course, I'll be teaching you philosophies and practices that combine my 3 favorite modalities: somatic experiencing, embodied parts work, and nutrition. For more information on this course, click on the link in my episode details. Listen, do you hear something? That's the sound of warm, delicious, glorious Costa Rica. And this is where I am headed next. On February 28th, I'm hosting a week-long retreat at the stunning Blue Spirit Retreat Center, and it's going to focus on recovering from emotional eating and people-pleasing by finding safety within. And there's truly not a better place for me to teach this than Blue Spirit. Blue Spirit has created a literal sanctuary for wildlife, native plants, and people who are lucky enough to retreat there. Picture a vibrant jungle canopy atop a hill with a saltwater infinity pool, yoga classes, next-level local cuisine, and beautiful views of the land and sea. Not to mention the very special, magical experience of wading in the saltwater pool while a crew of little baby monkeys rests on the branches above you. Your room is situated just minutes from the most beautiful ocean I've ever met, with tide pools featuring everything from blue octopus to starfish and a rainbow variety of tropical fish. And yes, I will be personally introducing you to each and every one of them. So let's go into the retreat itself. I'll be joined by my dear friends Zach and Camille as we teach you the art of finding safety in yourself, especially as it relates to fawning and people-pleasing and eating habits, which are all very connected. I'm going to teach you how to eat to recover from stress and trauma, how to use food cravings as a compass for unmet needs, how to tend to your capacity for being seen and being uncomfortable so you can stop fawning so much, and how to embody and ground big emotions and sensations that arise in your body. It's an easy flight to the airport, and Blue Spirit will manage your transportation from there. Visit holisticlifenavigation.com and click on events for more information, or click on the link in the episode details. We will be waiting for you on the other side in glorious, warm, vibrant Costa Rica.